All right, what is up, everyone? Very excited for this live stream today. Kicking it off, Gatsby with WordPress. We're beginning. I'm still wrapping up my advanced Gutenberg course, but the Gatsby for WordPress coursework has begun, and I'm really excited about this. I just want to share out a tweet real quick that we're going live here. Share now. Cool. And now we can get cracking. So, what my goal is for this is to basically just walk through the basic Gatsby JS tutorial. It's really good, and I really like how they've been putting effort into education with Gatsby. So I'm just going to walk through this. We'll probably get through about half of it this time, then I'll pick up with the next in the next live stream, because it's a really good idea before you go plug in WordPress, I think, to get an idea of how Gatsby is going to work out of the box. Now, if you don't know React, you could pick it up along the way. People are definitely doing that with Gatsby. But if you do know a little bit of it, that definitely helps. So let's go ahead and just get started. Welcome to Gatsby. I got the official Gatsby tutorial. This is just on gatsbyjs.org/tutorial. I'll throw that link in the chat. If you do hop by, say howdy. Say what's up, like, subscribe, all that good jazz, and let's get rolling. Okay, so what we're going to learn is how to set up and to deploy our first Gatsby site using the starter template, and we'll introduce some other topics. This tutorial is intended to be as accessible as possible without much web experience, which is great. No need to be an expert. So you can jump to this quick start page, which I recommend a lot of folks are probably capable of doing, but I want to take the time to go through all this. So set up your dev, getting to know Gatsby building blocks, introducing CSS, and then building nested layouts. And then from there, they've got some more advanced tutorials. Okay. So setting up the dev environment, it starts off just telling you what HTML is, what CSS is, what JavaScript is, what React is, and what GraphQL are. I'm going to kind of assume you've heard of these things before, and if not, you can go check out these docs. It'll explain it. The newer stuff is more the React to JavaScript library that Gatsby uses, as well as GraphQL, a query language. So if you're in the WordPress space, they've got the REST API. There's also a WP GraphQL plugin, and yeah, we'll circle back to WordPress stuff later, but kind of mention that now. Basically, by default, what Gatsby can do is look through all the REST API endpoints and let us write GraphQL to access their data. There's also a native GraphQL plugin for WordPress as well. All right, so comprehensive introduction. It shows you, okay, check this out for how to build your first web page, some introductions to all of these, so you can go check those out. Also, familiarize yourself with the command line, and you're definitely going to be using that. I've got Atom Code Editor, and I've got my terminal set up here. They give some resources for learning all of this. I've also got a site, Command Line Basics, whichever one you decide to use, but Command Line Basics, throw that in the link here. And then you could also check out these resources as well. Since a number of the commands you do have to type into the command line, it is helpful to know your way around. But luckily, you don't have to type much. Most of the stuff is just 3 or 4 words, and you'll usually be able to copy and paste what you need to do. So yeah, you should be pretty good there, and this could be a great introduction to using the command line. Node.js, although technically it will be running in Gatsby, we're not really, well, I guess we are writing some Node.js, but we'll just call it JavaScript. But you do need to make sure you have Node.js installed, so they go through some resources for how to install Node and all of that, how to get it set up, and you could always just test what version you have, Node version, and you could check to see if you've got the latest. Cool. We also need NPM, another great tool that's going to be used for getting all of our packages rather than having to link to them directly and manage them ourselves. So we could also check that we've got NPM. I don't know, I should be close to up to date on the latest, but up to date enough to work. Yeah, see, these are a little bit older than what I've got anyways. Okay. So then you got to get familiar with NPM, sort of like the command line. It's one of the command line tools. There's not a lot to it, and there are some great resources. The docs for NPM are really great. I also have on JavaScript for WP some introductions to installing and getting up and running with NPM as well too. So number of free resources there to dig in deeper. Again, you're not going to need to type much. You'll type like npm install. You might type like npm run or npm build. It's going to be pretty simple commands that you're typing. Next, we want git installed. And so technically, I don't know that you need this, but you really should have it. It'll, be a way to pull down files when you want to fork somebody else's repo that they're working on. And it's also a great way to just track all of your stuff. So if you're not working with Git yet, check out these resources that'll help you kind of get up and running, as well as this Git handbook, which tries to simplify in about 10 minutes Git at a high level so you could understand it, as well as get some of an idea of what some of the commands you're going to see. I know that this could be a lot when you're just getting up and running, but if you take the time to try to learn every single one of them, it might actually take a while. So I'd suggest just familiarizing yourself with them and then trying to pick them up as you go along. So don't think to know Gatsby, you need to go watch all these tutorials on all these other things in a lot of depth and take weeks or whatever to do that. You could probably just pick up a lot as you go along, but it helps to know these terms. And then we've got the Gatsby CLI. So to set up and running Gatsby, we'll type something like npm x Gatsby help, which is an extension of npm. And so we want to make sure that we have Gatsby installed. And do we? I know that I do. So let's run npx Gatsby help. Yeah, and we should see a whole bunch of stuff here. These are all the commands that we could call with Gatsby: develop, build, set up a new Gatsby site, all of these. So if you don't have that installed, you'll want to make sure that you grab that. Okay. Although I think, is it installed? Yeah, okay. You don't need to install the GraphQL locally. You can just run npx and that will grab all of that code and run it for you. So the difference between npm will pull stuff down and manage it for you. npx can access libraries and actually execute the code on your behalf. So simplifies the process there. Pretty cool. All right, so we looked at those paths there. Yeah, sometimes you might hit errors if you don't have full access or admin access, so there are some resources for doing that. Of course, there's always the hack sudo, although I don't know if that's really a great practice. Okay. Now we're getting to creating our first Gatsby site. So we're ready to use the tool, and we're going to download what are called starters, which are partially built sites with some default configuration. This is really great that Gatsby offers a bunch of these, and there's a link to them in a moment. But the most basic one is the Hello World starter, and that's what we'll be using here. So it says open up your terminal and run the following. So let's close this terminal out, open up a new one. We'll get nice and big so we could see this. And then it says run npm x Gatsby new hello world, and then this. So it gives us a repo, it looks like. Let's go ahead, paste that in and run it. It says this might take a while. It's fetching some packages. In the meantime, what I like to do whenever I'm running something is also go check out whatever it is that I'm running, right? So we come up here and we can see that this is a bare essential repo for getting started. And there's a little tutorial there. It shows us what files there are and how to learn a little bit more about that. So cool. It looks like we've got everything done. ls is going to show us what's in there. So it created a new directory, and that's important to point out that I started a level above my directory, and now my Gatsby site, if I cd into hello world, just like it says here, now I'm in the actual repo for this. So now it tells me run npm run develop, and we don't really know what that's going to do yet, but let's just go ahead and execute that. What just happened? Okay, starting with npx, we ran a package. Like I said, npm will let you execute npm packages without installing it. Then Gatsby says, hey, we want to use the Gatsby tool. New is one of the commands from Gatsby saying, hey, set up a new site. And then hello world, this is the directory and also the name of the site we're going to give it. And then finally, a URL specified points to a code repository that holds the starter code you want to use. All right, then we cd'd into our directory. So that means cd is change directories. And wherever we want to run commands for your site, we need to be in that folder. So if I want to do anything with Gatsby, I need to be inside of this hello world folder that I just created. And now we can view our site locally. So let's check this out. If I see this right here, local site 8000, I now have my Gatsby site. That's super cool. We built a site with Gatsby. Success. This is the very beginning. You'll be able to visit your site here for as long as it's running. So if I do Control C to stop that server and I come back to my site, we can see that cannot be reached. But then if I run npm run develop again, here, let me clear that out. If I run npm run develop again, give it a second, it will boot that server back up. And now we've got it again. Cool. Okay, let's keep going with this tutorial. to stop running, we press Control C to run again. Cool. If we're using VM setup like Vagrant, I'm not here, but you could also run develop to check it on your local IP as well. That's cool. Now it comes into the code editor. Now, like it recommends, I'm using VS Code here, so pretty simple there. It shows you how to download it. And VS Code is pretty simple, common, very popular tool at the moment for code editing, especially JavaScript. And then you want to install the Prettier plugin. So inside of here, we have plugins. And one of the plugins is Prettier. And Prettier is great because what it does is it will auto-format your code. So you could do Command-Shift-P to format a document. Let me just open up some files here. Oop, that is not what we meant to do. Let's grab that back. Cool. Okay. So I'm going to CD back into Hello World. Bump that up a bit so we can see a bit better. And if I come into any JavaScript file, let me just, here's one, and I start like doing some weird stuff in here, styling. If I hit Control Save, see how that got auto-formatted? So I have this Prettier plugin installed, and normally you have to run a command. Is it format? Format to run it. But you could also set up your settings in a way that you could run editor format on save. I have it set to false because I don't want it doing it for every document. But we could say for JavaScript specifically, go ahead and reformat it, all my code. You could also just, I believe you could take all this out and just set this to true. And then Prettier will reformat all your code automatically every time you save. And that's the way I like to use it. So it recommends doing this setting, click install, and there are some more instructions on taking that further. But super helpful. All right, what's next? So we've learned about the web technologies, HTML, CSS, JavaScript, React, GraphQL. We talked about the command line a bit, how to use it, like some directory CD. We can go back a directory like that. We could do CD hello world. And I can also tab now and it'll autocomplete. That's really cool when you're trying to link into a file. And also ls will list all of the files. So some helpful tools there, or some helpful commands there. And we saw some resources for learning more about that. Installed and learned about Node.js. That's going to be JavaScript on the server. We know the CLI tool we could use running npx. We generated a new site. We got our first Gatsby site. Check that out. Pretty cool. We ran Gatsby development server, visitor site locally. We got all of it. And then we installed code formatter Prettier. Now, before we go on with the official tutorial, I'm going to go ahead and run npm run develop again. And I just want to play around with this a little bit because notice how I just knew right to jump into a certain page to start editing it. Some of these folders here, and I think the tutorial will talk about it, but if you jump right into source, which is pretty true for any JavaScript app, the code that you will actually edit versus the compiled finished code is going to be in source. And if I come into pages index, this is going to represent my home page right here. So I could put in any JSX or React. Like let's change this to not just be a hello world like that, but an H1. Hello Gatsby. Save it, it'll auto format it, and now we've got my H1. So, haha, hey Paul. Just say, hey, yeah, been a while since I was rocking WordPress at Treehouse, but I love that place. Treehouse, great site, good content. I think they still have a few of my Treehouse or WordPress courses up there, but yeah, not there at the moment. Okay, unless they want a WordPress course, happy to come do one. Okay, so next we got to move on to knowing the building blocks. And I don't think I'll get too far through this tutorial because I've got to run in a few, but let's see how far we could get. Okay. So now we take a deeper dive into the code. In the first one, we set up and ran this. So I don't need to run that again because I already did it. But it shows you a bunch of official starters, which is great. So let me just pop this whole thing out. These are a bunch of starter, I don't want to say themes because themes are something different in Gatsby. But these are a bunch of starter files that you could basically run install, and it'll give you this nice styled theme. It might give you some pages and demo content set up. And this is really cool that these exist. So once you finish this tutorial, I definitely recommend you're going to jump in and I'll kind of walk through this as well. Like find one of these that you like and it'll give you instructions on how to install it. Well, we'll come back to it. There are instructions on how to install these, but you would basically... Oh yeah, this is, instead of saying starter the hello world, you would point to this and give it the repo for it, or just give it the repo and it will pull that starter file down. So let's see, source. Yeah, so let's just test if what I'm saying is correct. I'm going to stop this server. I'm going to go back out the directory. So I'm going to do cd back. And now I'm in the same folder where hello world is inside. And I'm just going to try running this again. So npx, what was it? Gatsby new. Gatsby, let me boost this up a bit. Gatsby new, and then I want to call this, what was the name of this theme? Or this starter. That's a better term. Gatsby starter hero blog. So I'll call this hero blog, and then we paste in the repo to it. I don't know if that's going to work. Let's go see what that last repo did, because yeah, it's pointing to the URL. I just wanted to make sure it wasn't pointing to the Git file of it. So let's just run this. Hey, Susanna, how's it going? All right, so we're just waiting for this to load, but I'm pretty sure it's going to do the same thing as before. All right, so where were we on our tutorialing? We were on this one, Gatsby starters. We checked out the starter. I have one running here just to test it out. We'll come back to that in a second. If you omit the URL from the end, Gatsby will automatically generate a site for you based on the default starter. So if you just run Gatsby install new and then give it a name without that URL, then it will just use the default starter, which is that hello world, which is totally cool. That is oftentimes all you need because everything else you want to customize on your own. So now we're going to open up the code, and this is where we kind of jumped ahead a little bit. It's going to show us all of these, the different directories. I'm kind of waiting for this, so I'll talk ahead a little bit. Well, let's see how long we want to wait for that. Let's keep reading here. Open up the code. In your code editor, open up the code generated from your Hello World site. So let's just keep following along. That can keep going in the background. I'll open up a new command line here and run. Now I'm inside my Hello World site again. And I want to run, where'd it go? npm run develop. So anytime we start, we need to run that again. I think we could also just type Gatsby developed, but that's only if you have the CLI tool locally. So I'm guessing the tutorial will come to that at some point. But now we should see our site again. Cool, up and running, good. Familiarize yourself with the pages. Open the source and go into pages, which is where I am now. Open the file at index.js and you can see a single div with hello world. Make some changes. We did that. Hello Gatsby, that's exactly what we did. And we added an H1. Now it talks about hot reloading, which means that it's going to watch and update the page live. So if I come back in here and I do hello world Gatsby question mark and save it, notice that that went live. I didn't have to refresh the page. Hopefully you're familiar and have been using these type of tools, but this is great. Let me change it back because we are excited. Oh, there we go. Okay, so to watch all the files, you could change the files immediately. You could do all sorts of other things. It says we could even put some color in here. So inline styles are not the end-all and be-all of what you could do with React, but they are an easy way to get started. And we'll talk over the course of all this about other CSS approaches. But let's just do this for now. We could do style equals. With JSX, this means that now we could return JavaScript, but we actually have to return an object, which means we put one more of those in. And we're going to say color, it's doing purple. And then font size, whenever you're doing inline CSS in JavaScript, you don't put the hyphens, you do it in camel case. So what would before be font size is now going to be font size like that. And then we want to do font size 72 pixels. I don't know why they're using query strings versus not, but let's just go ahead and test that. Bring it back down to regular size. Sweet, we did it. All right, and remove the font styling and change it to be something else. So now it wants us to do it differently. So change the font size. We already changed ours to an H1, so I was kind of ahead. And then we're gonna do what a world, period. And let's come back, check it. It's all purple, great. So that is exactly how it should be. Now it shows us how to add an image. In this case, a random image from Unsplash. If you don't know about Unsplash, it's a great place to get royalty-free images, all sorts of different kinds. Really, really cool one, great library. So what we could do here is we could go image source, and if we go to source or image source Unsplash random, we could get an image of some size or a random image of that exact size. So I'm just going to copy this, paste it in. Come over, check my site, and now we've got a new page. And every time, not every time the page loads, when would this refresh? I think it's only going to refresh, if there's like something serious that changes and we have to recompile it. Because Gatsby is cached heavily, that's one of the beautiful things about it. So every time it goes to this page, it's not necessarily going to grab a new one. Now it looks like it is. See, sometimes it isn't. If I do a hard refresh now, nope, it's not even then. Okay, we'll figure that out later. But we've got an image, so that's great. Now, if we were to change this, I bet it would reflect itself and change automatically. So if I make a change to the image, then it'll force it to change. So if you are in dev and you ever want to change your image, just know that once you change it and refresh it, then it should work, give you the right one. Okay, so if you're familiar with React and JSX, skip this section. I don't know your familiarity, but I'm going to keep going through the tutorial. What is this HTML doing in our JavaScript? Well, that is JSX, and why we're importing React on the first line. This is this. This is a hybrid of HTML and JS, and it's a syntax called syntax extension of JavaScript, or JSX. No, JavaScript syntax extension? I don't remember the exact thing. Okay, so it comes back here and it shows us, hey, if we have a div like this in React, what we'd really have to type is React create element, a div that has no settings and just has this as a child or just text. So this is basic React stuff, but JSX looks a lot nicer than having to write this, especially when it gets into nested stuff. Let's see, doing both live streaming with prep and... So someone was asking, am I going to do a premium course or just putting videos on YouTube? And both. I'm going to live stream my prep of it, which should be a lot of work and a lot of hours. And I don't know, some of you may enjoy watching through of it, but also have the finished course for sale for those who don't want to take all the time to watch me learn all of this and get the condensed, nice, final, best approach to learning it. All right, so building with components. Components are building blocks for your site. They're self-contained piece of code that gives you a section of the user interface. Gatsby is built on React. When we talk about components, we're talking specifically about React components. So there's components in a large sense you'll hear referred to in general web development, but there's also a React component, which means something specific, but it does fall into the category of larger components. Piece of code, piece of the UI. It'll make more sense as we go along. One of the big shifts you have to make if you're already a developer is that now we're going to move away from our HTML, CSS, and JavaScript being separate, and they're all going to be together, not necessarily inline styled like this, but we will have our CSS, our JavaScript, and our HTML all together in the code. So it shows us this primary button. Perhaps we do a class, but in a component world, we'd have a primary button like this that would be customized to be that specific type of button. There's a docs page on building with components. I'm going to skip over for now to keep going. And then we have our page components. You already have a page at index.js, and now it wants us to create a file at pages.about.js. This is one of the cool things about Gatsby. So I'm going to create a new file called about.js. And then inside of here, I will just paste in what they give us. Super simple tutorial to follow. Okay, and now the cool thing is I should be able to go to my site and do /about, and I've automatically got a page that's styled and colored and all this stuff just from here. So this is how Gatsby does static site generation. So any page that you set up here, however you name it here, this is going to be its slug up here. So we can navigate there and see it. We just put a React component, so technically this new about page is in itself a component. Now it's going to get into what if we want subcomponents, which is super helpful because you can imagine an entire complex page might get really big and there might be pieces of code you want to reuse on different pages, so we could break that up into different parts. So now it's going to show us how to go through and make an H1 header. So it wants us to go in to create a new folder called components, which is a really common naming convention. So we're going to call components, and then it wants us to do a header.js component. So inside of components, we'd have a bunch of small subcomponents that would go inside of our larger ones. And so now it's pretty simple. Import React. Now, why would we do this? It might not make sense yet, but it will as we go along why we want to break this out. So let's come back into our about.js, and underneath importing React, we're going to import the header that we just made. So we could say import header from, go into my components folder and find my header. Notice it's really cool. We don't have to write header.js. It just knows, hey, I'm here, go out, go into components and find header. So we could leave off the JS. It's pretty cool. All right, now, instead of having this right here, we just do header. And I'll bring this up. So as soon as we save it, as soon as I save this, as soon as I save this, yeah, this is a header. So that shows up. Cool. So this is a header, shows up. Now the problem is that this is not customizable. So having a header like this that's hard-coded makes zero sense. But if we do this, and we get props or properties of this, header text, then we can make it dynamic. So all we have to do now is send into this component a variable or a value for get header text. And props is something that's very Reacty. In fact, now we've got to change this because it's going to receive a parameter. Anything you pass into a component will be automatically attached to something called props. Howdy, Ryan. Again, this is React stuff, but you could pick it up as you go along. What props are going to do will make sense in a second. So I got my header text, and if I come back in here, inside of header, I could pass in a value, and I'm going to say about Gatsby. And now my header will dynamically change. So if I change about Gatsby 1, 2, 3, so now any page on my site can use this same header, and if I wanted to style it or change it to something else or add a class on the fly, I only have to change it in one place, which is why we use subcomponents or nested components. So it talks about what are props. These are different pieces of data that we could pass into a component. Think of them kind of like functions or function parameters, or you could think of them as HTML attributes. They can modify how stuff works. So here we have header text that we pass in when we call the component, and then inside of it we could type props.headerText. We could also pass in an arbitrary phrase. So now it shows us, hey, we could do something else. So if I come back here, I could do arbitrary phrase. And now inside of my header, I could change. How is it telling us to change this? It's not. Okay, we could just throw it in here. We could grab props.arbitrary phrase after it, and it would show this. Okay, so that's how props work at a high level. Pretty simple stuff, and they look like HTML components. Now, of course, there's more to it, but again, we're picking up React as we go here. So now it shows us, hey, the cool thing about this header component is it's reusable. So second header, and that will give us two headers. Two headers. Now, we got to get into using layout components. So layouts, it explores a bit later, and I do want to throw out, I think that they might be removing the layout component in the next version of Gatsby, so I'm not sure how that will go, but for now, we're just following their tutorial. We'll update it and learn as we go along. Now, to link between two pages is so easy, especially if you used React Router or something like that. We don't have to configure all that. All we have to do is import a special link tag from Gatsby. So I'm back in my index file here. And I could say import link. Of course, you do have to spell it correctly, from Gatsby. And it also wants us to go and import our header from components/header, so we could reuse that same header again. And now we're going to make some modifications. So at the top, we're going to use our link tag, which is super simple, link to, and then where we want to link. So we do \contact, just like that. Really simple, just like an HTML link. Pretty easy to do. And behind the scenes, that's a lot of work and wiring that's happening, and they give you some magic there. So I also want to remove this H1 hard-coded, and I could replace this with a header text. Now, would you want to replace every H1 in an app with its own component? Maybe not, but this is just an example of how they work. So now when we click, if we go back to our home page, oh, we never built a contact page. Okay, maybe the tutorial knows that. Yeah, it knows that. Okay. So now if we click contact, notice that it goes to contact and it gives us this 404. And this is an automatic Gatsby 404 that can be customized, and it'll tell you how to get into that more in the doc. So you can set up a custom 404, control it that way, which of course you're going to want to do. But now what it's showing you is that you don't have to have a page that exists to link to it, which is not true, or well, is a little bit trickier with routers and stuff. So what it's going to do is give us this contact page to create. So I'll just come in here and under pages, create a new contact.js. And I'm just going to copy and paste this. We'll get into how to do forms and all sorts of cool stuff here over time. But now you notice if we go to home, we've got a link to home and we've got a link to contact, or we've got a contact page. Cool, just like that. So now we've got routing set up, which is sometimes a pretty big thing in an app, and we did it pretty quickly with Gatsby. There's more info here on the Gatsby link, and now we've got to deploy it. So it's going to recommend we use Surge for deploying our first site. There are a lot of great hosts out there for this kind of stuff, but what we're going to need to do is stop our server. So I'll hit Control-C, and I'm going to type npm install global surge. I'm not sure, I might already have it installed, so this might take a few minutes. Then create a free account with them. So let's go to Surge. It's not .com, I think it's like .io. That's not it. Surge hosting. SH, yep. Do I have a login? How do you log in? Well, we'll find out in a second. Pricing? Free? Get started free? How do we log in? Yeah, I guess it does it all. It's all through the command line. So cool nowadays. Okay. Oh dear, it failed. Why did this fail? Permission denied. Let's just try, okay, this is a hack. I don't know that I recommend this, but let's just try it this way with sudo. And now it's going to take us through the process of, there's one command to run when we're trying to build our site and we want to track the changes, but then when we're ready to finish it, then we run npm build, and this will get it ready to ship live. And it will also create a public folder. So right here, this is going to be the folder that actually ships, and it'll have a cached HTML page from the about page that we created with that dynamic content, although you can tell it doesn't look exactly like that because it's doing a lot of extra stuff, compression and all these other things. But we have this public folder now, and that's what we're going to ship to our hosting company or to our hosting provider. So we got to go into public. So I'm going to, ls public. It just wants us to show what's inside of public. Yeah, a bunch of files. And now we're going to tell Surge to run, to launch the public folder. So Surge public /, Surge public /. So let's run this. Now it's going to enter an email and a password. Uh-oh, am I about to give away all my credentials here? Yikes. There's my, hold on. Let's try this again. I think I hit an extra character there. Email @zachgordon.com. Password. Y'all gonna see this? Nope. Domain illegalparcel.surge, I guess. Cool. That sounds suspect, though. I hope my site doesn't get hacked. But now if I go to illegalparcel.surge.sh, I've got my Gatsby site launched. And it's static. It's super fast. It's going to load these dynamic images each time. And this is what I mean by see how it is kind of cached, so it might not always be a fresh one. Every once in a while, it might refresh itself. But now we've got this whole thing set up. And this is the first part of the tutorial that I wanted to walk through. So I'll pause here, and then in the next live stream, we'll come in and we'll look at adding styles, because there's a few things to that. But this is pretty cool. Within the course of not too much time, we got set up with Gatsby, we launched something. And as I mentioned, even though I'm going to be getting into hooking in this with WordPress and doing some more advanced custom stuff, I think it's always a good idea to start with these basic tutorials. So this is what I'll be banging out. Mike asks a question, should I study PHP before studying WordPress development? There are some basics that are helpful to know. I have a Udemy course that covers them, particularly hooks, template files, basic plugin stuff. But at the same time, I've also seen a lot of people do this without having learned all of this stuff. So I'll say, however, it is possible to pick this up along the way too. But that course, you might not even need to build something complicated. Just go watch that hooks and filters section, and that should help quite a lot. Okay, my 10-minute alarm is going off. I got to run. Thank you so much for tuning in. Please like, subscribe, and the course is already on pre-sale. It's going to be amazing. So if you don't want to watch hours and hours and hours of prep walking through all this, just grab that pre-course and get the final thing. All right, take care, everyone. Peace.